I need to see the Zoom window to do that. So now I'm gonna go right over.
Yes, hi.
There we go. Now you're all set. You're what?
We're good? Okay. Welcome to the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee. This is January 19th. We're going to be talking about the unemployment insurance modernization project. So what I'd like to start with is the review from Lisa. I'd like to let her get through her review and then we can do questions, unless it's a real quick clarifying question, if that's all right. So with that, Lisa, please.
Okay, so I will be referencing the document that was posted with this agenda. For the record, my name is Lisa Dobbin. I'm the IT consultant for JFO. So to start, I just wanted to talk about something that we're doing a little bit differently on the IT review is making a concerted effort to include both the business information as well as the IT information for these projects because there are components of both. So some of the language that I'll be using might be different. For example, to start, we're talking about the UIM project, which is the Unemployment Insurance Modernization Project. And the components of that are the actual unemployment information system that Jitoc is charged to release the funds to proceed with that project. But the project also includes support for the business for this, which is the business process redesign project. What that is labor is going to issue an RFP, and it's the same RFP that was used for the ERP system to redesign business processes in support of the new system. Because the agency is going to experience significant change moving from the old system to the new system. And that means how they work should change too. Because there's an old saying in IT, you don't want to pave a cow path, right? So how they actually operate is going to change significantly. And so this project is meant to support that. Also, the staff augmentation piece. This piece is Commissioner Harrington obtained money in addition to his operational funds of $3 million for FY starting in FY24 for staff augmentation in support of the project. So in other words, as people are pulled off their regular jobs to work on the implementation, there's money to bring on people to help do the work they would have been doing. So this project, so based on this, we're able to, the funds that the estimates here, of course, they're all in detail in the cost in the finance section of the document, but it's $25 million for the implementation of the system. And I'm sorry, 25 months for implementation of the system, and then an additional 3 years of operating costs. So in other words, all the costs that we're looking at are spread out over that particular time period. Or just because the UI information system, that's where the cost estimates were provided. So the total cost of the project is $45.3 million. So that includes the cost to the vendor for the system and the state costs and the cost that we know about for the project. In addition, for the funds available, we came up with a $52.3 million funds are available for this project. So when that includes the allocation that was provided for the UI system, as well as the costs added to the operational budget for labor to cover the staff augmentation and the business process redesign. So that's what that is. So that covers the cost, and again, we can discuss the details of that in a bit. The things to know about this system that I think were really important is, to start, we're not mentioning the vendor because the contract hasn't been signed. But I did have information on the specifics of the bid, which was analyzed in their implementation proposal. It's great. This vendor has an excellent track record. They've delivered this system, at least at the time of the bid. This could have increased to 6 other states on time and on budget. This particular vendor has also worked with the state of Vermont, has delivered 2 major systems on time and on budget. So this is an excellent track record. And just like when you're hiring people, the best indication of performance is how they performed in the past. So I'm very comfortable with the track record of this vendor and the fact that the solution is in place in other states. The other thing to know about this project is the state did a really nice job in terms of not just compiling the initial business requirements for the RFP, but also in the contract. So it was really notable to me how much the requirements and the specifics of the bid evolved between the RFP and the contract. And what that shows is that there was a really positive feedback loop between what was learned in the process and how they defined what they needed in the final solution. So the contract here had very specific, the contract says very specific objectives and deliverables. So this was also a sign of a good process. So if you move to the part of the document that is the chart, really the ratings for the review, that's on page 2. For the overall status, again, it's I ranked it as strong for the track record of the vendor and the preparedness of the state. Now, there are still some things that are unknown, which are the costs of the business support pieces that I mentioned. So that's the cost of the business process reengineering and staff augmentation. But that really, it's just sort of the nature of where we are in the project and why that information isn't available. So that's why it's not rated as an excellent, whereas all known facts are available. The balance between the amount of funds that are available to the project and what costs have already been identified as $7 million. So, although I can't say that that's enough for business process reengineering and staff augmentation, it's a considerable amount. So we just have to see where that amount comes in, but it doesn't seem like there's a great risk there to me that they didn't have enough money to finish the project. So around the project justification, we all know the situation with the current system. The application part is 30 to 40 years old with a 50-year-old mainframe, and we know it's experienced some instability recently. So of course we need to move forward on this project, but I think they're fortunate at this time to have such a really sound plan for a solution for that in the course of 25 months. Around the clarity of purpose, this is really about how do they know they're going to be successful? Is that defined? And I believe it is in the contract. Clear objective goals, clear deliverables. Around the organizational support, I think labor really identified, and I outlined this in the contract specifically, some really good staff members with a lot of experience in this particular area. And it must have been a hard choice to pull people that are so important to the operations of the system onto the new system, but I think it's a good call, and they're there for the organization too. So I think it does show considerable support. I know Commissioner Harrington and Secretary Riley Hughes both serving as their respective business and IT sponsors for the projects and are engaged and understand the critical nature of the system. So I feel like they do understand and there's significant organizational support for the project. Still, we all know the situation in Vermont for staffing. It's hard to find people right now. It's hard to find housing. So one of the areas that we will keep our eye on is how the staff augmentation goes. So that's a concern. Also, at the time when I was completing this review, the project manager had not been assigned for the project, and that's under the project management piece. And also the business analysts have not been assigned. There was an active procurement because the decision was made to hire a project manager for this project due to just limitations of staff availability. So that was underway, and I think the names weren't available at the time, but this is not an area that is typically challenging for ADS. I've never seen them not add project managers and business analysts to a project at the time. So And I also think it's easily resolved and everything was in place to get to those needs. So I anticipate that will be done, resolved quickly. Around the financial considerations, I already discussed that a lot. We do have some unknown costs, but it seems like funds are sufficient, but we will definitely keep an eye on that and monitor that in the future. Around the technical approach, again, we have a vendor that has sound methodology, proven track record. They also, Vermont is familiar with their implementation methodology because they've worked with them in other agencies and departments, and it's really worked out well. So again, I rated that one as excellent, which is a high bar for them. So I think around the next piece, if we jump to the risks and monitoring on page 14, the document. So typically for projects that we do review, we monitor them moving forward. There are typical areas that we're monitoring are the milestones being met. These are all the contract requirements. How's the timeline going? Is it staffed well? Just the typical issues. Were they forced to issue change orders that are based on requirements that just weren't identified but should have been? So the other pieces, though, if you move on to the next page, additional areas to monitor. This is where I tailor based on the projects that I'm reviewing specific concerns about this project. And so you'll note in bullet 5, it identifies those unknown areas of the cost, the business process re-engineering, the staff augmentation, and also the assignment of the project manager in the VA. So what I'm asking ADS and labor is to let me know when they've identified those particular costs. I'll be monitoring too, but specifically when we have assigned staff. And then also the business process redesign. So this is separate from the fact that we don't know what it's going to cost. It's really, we want to make sure that it's managed in a way, the way an IT project is managed. Now, right now, the state, ADS, and BD, labor consider this a business activity, but it really does need to be coordinated very closely with the implementation of the system itself, because really it's the functionality of the system and the workflow of the system that will drive many of the changes that are done. And also there's a risk that, based on how employees look at how everything they've always known on how the unemployment has worked in the past, they might not see new ways to do things and new ways to leverage the new system. And that's something that's key for this vendor. So it really should be managed by a project manager in the same way an IT project is managed. And then lastly, the last two issues are common in all the projects that I've worked with so far. It's issues around data migration and data conversion, which is.
No, it's fine. It was me. I turned the monitor off here. Messed it up. Yeah, we good.
But
Meeting's still live. The meeting's
You were
still
still
live.
live?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
So around data migration, it's because you have old data in an old system that might not have had the same business rules that you have in the new system. And sometimes you need to convert it in different ways because it doesn't go into the system in the same type of fields. Like you might have day, month, year separate fields in the old system, but they might be in one field. So all of that activity has to be coordinated. But I think most importantly, you have to decide what makes sense to move into a new system or not. Maybe data that's 10 years out and hasn't been changed in 10 years associated with a person that hasn't been in the system in 10 years. Maybe you want to put that in the state data lake. So those types of issues, but that gets complicated. And one last thing, integration points. So these are places where the system would interact with state systems like Vision and other state systems. So that's typically really complicated, but this vendor has a good track record in implementing with these same systems in other projects. And that's the end of so obviously I'm recommending this project proceed based on what I've seen with the caveats listed under the monitoring section. So I'm ready for questions.
Possibility, please.
So I have several questions, if that's all right. And I'm not sure if they are for Lisa or Secretary Riley Hughes. Is that okay? Okay. So how can we do this faster? I'm concerned about the system, how disruptive it is, and how Vermonters are able to experience this benefit.
I am all, and I'll definitely let her answer this, but I would be more concerned about asking a vendor to change a proven implementation methodology. And perhaps I would ask, what can we do to shore up the existing system and make sure that it can function? But
That's further down on my list.
Secretary, right, he's trying to be Secretary of the, you're 100% right. So that's actually what we're doing in prep for, this contract going live, is we are shoring up a climate stabilization effort, and we are looking at it as we need to keep this up and running for at least the next 4 years. That doesn't indicate project go live, but what it does is it indicates where we would anticipate decommissioning. And we're actively working on that as we speak. And then we have been working on it since December, when we identified some anomalies in the environment.
And so my next question was, how is risk and disruption being managed currently? So I'm hearing you say, would you add anything to that?
How is it being managed today in the existing environment?
Yeah.
We have a number of folks from across ADF with skill sets that we brought in to support the Department of Labor, who don't traditionally support them, that have, as you had said, a new perspective and new lens to make sure that we are not missing something. We don't want to treat symptoms. We want to rectify the bigger issue going on here. And that's what we're doing. And I think that over the course of the next 8 weeks, Commissioner, we will have that in a stabilization effort. And we have, with the support of the Commissioner's team, they're sending our communications to the users around the system experience, because we are going to change some things in order to ensure stabilization.
What if something goes wrong between now and which, I mean, it's had a good long life, but it certainly seems to, if it can go wrong, it might go wrong.
We anticipate that things are going to go wrong. And so we have a number of different mitigation steps in place. One is gaining additional support within the mainframe environment, and that's actually not where the events are happening. It is where it's connecting and running processes as it leaves the mainframe. We're considering all, I shouldn't say considering, we're acting on all of those aspects right now. So our risk mitigation plan is very sound.
What if there isn't enough money? So when will we know, and how will we handle that?
Based on all of the short-term, long-term costs, we do have this project fully funded.
And last one for me is, are we estimating downtime? So with V-Trans, that whole system went down to do migration or whatever you would call it. Are we anticipating something like that here? And if so, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to provide benefits in the interim? Talk a little bit about that.
So I think Commissioner Harrington can speak to the plan for continuity of services. I would anticipate that we will have planned downtime. And with that, it will be built into the communication plan of the project. This vendor is not immune to that. So we know where that's going to happen in the process, and we'll plan ahead. The decision made by Commissioner Noli was unique, where she gained a quicker go live time by turning the system off for 4 days over the long weekend. I mean, a holiday weekend. So that's not been something that has been initially planned for. That's not the goal of this project, but it will be factored into the decisions when we know more. They go through a first phase of discovery as well. So we'll have some of that deeper scheduling detail built in after that first phase is done.
So actually, just one more comment then, I guess, for you, Mr. Chair, and for Lisa, this will be a key issue for me. Making sure that we understand how that planning is coming along and what the plan is. And this system experiences disruptions, and it's very jarring for hunters. So to the extent that we all have a long runway on this, I think it will be really. So thank you.
I think regular check-ins throughout the process is.
Actually, that's my question, kind of is like, what is the schedule? Maybe that's for you, Lisa, maybe that's for Mr. Perry, but like the the schedule for checking in on things, and so that we're maybe like, if there's flags and we're anticipating that there's gonna be an issue, or we can't find a PM or whatever it is, that we're not reactionary when there's like another crash. And given that we're like meeting every other week, like, I hope at least this session we're checking in on this again. But just your thoughts on like,
It varies per project on how often I check in, but given the issues around this one, it would definitely be more frequent. And we'll probably set up just a routine meeting to discuss it. And I do have access to the EPMO status report, so I can actually read things weekly. And those are really good sources for how things are going. Also, but I think what your, both your points around the implementation, it was something that I had flagged earlier on, really the intent was to go live with phase one of this project. I mentioned this now prior meeting. And then go live with that piece, which is the tax portion of the system, and then the benefits portion we go live a year later. I had expressed concerns that I was concerned about decoupling the tax piece on the mainframe side, that it would have unintended consequences on the operation of the system. So that's something we're in conversation about. It's on everybody's radar. And maybe that would be a great check on with our Jitoc on what's the plan, what's the take? How do we think we can go ahead with that?
Would members of the committee like to be copied on the update reports? Would members of the committee rather have that go through JFO and then have us get the summary?
I'm fine with JFO, like, as long as it's a regular point.
And we could agree on just a frequency of update, when I update you.
I'm happy to have the chair, vice chair copied if that's reasonable as well, but
I mean, I go and I literally monitor those project status reports as they're posted. And I can provide updates to the committee.
Thank you. Senator.
I just wonder, is there a real reasonable possibility of the kind of catastrophic failure that would bring the existing system down to the point that it was unusable for an extended period of time?
So I don't have a great answer for that. There's always the unknown. So I can't with full confidence say 100% absolutely not. We will never have that problem because there's things that we won't have control over. The mitigation steps that we're putting in place today, and we're actually on the stabilization effort, is not being run as this UI modernization project. It is being run separately, means, obviously within the quarter use as well. And with the mainframe and the support within the mainframe, we've also added additional measures to ensure that we don't have any issues in the support of the existing environment. So I'm confident that what we have in place today is going to keep it up and running past go live of the new environment, so that we don't have that disruption in service. But we do have plans in place if that event occurs.
So in the event that there is the kind of catastrophic failure that extends for a period of time, you're confident that there are sufficient plans in place to do this task, if you will, another way in the interim within a reasonable period of time?
If I could jump in on that, for the record, Michael Harrington, Commissioner of the Department of Labor. To the Senator's point, too, we testified, I think, back during the pandemic and after about this real risk of catastrophic failure, essentially it might go to sleep one night and never wake up again. And a lot has changed in terms of the foundational components that are keeping the mainframe alive. So a lot of what we experienced early on was less around, how the mainframe was coded and more of the systems and the hardware that the mainframe was sitting on. So the mainframe has been moved off-site. It does sit at a tech vault, tech center someplace. I don't even know where. But it's on newer hardware, so I'm less concerned about the hardware failure that would cause corruption and loss of the entire system. And we're also making changes to the ancillary systems as well to shore up those systems. So that risk, I think, has shrunk or been mitigated. Again, you never know the unknown. In the case of some type of catastrophic failure, we've got a couple different options. None of them are perfect, but we do have the ability to go back to paper claims taking if we needed to do that. So we could be looking at how do we take new claims and how do we take weekly claims by paper or some other, simple low code solution. And then I think in extreme cases, there also have been circumstances where states have relied on other states to process claims through their systems. And so we had, even during the pandemic, we started having that talk. It wasn't fully vetted because it's highly complex. But I think in places where there have been disasters and such, other states have been able to, at least to some degree, process claims out of another state's system.
Well, that's one of the questions, is the amount of time that it would take, the amount of effort it would take in order to come up with that contingent plan, and where the contingent plan is right now in relation to the potential of implementing. For example, in the event that you had to rely on another state to do something, because, and you told us repeatedly about the possibility of contingent a really catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
How long would it take you to get up to the point of being able to use carbon paper and the other things that you need to do that?
Yeah, I might look to Cameron, who is also serves as our UI director. But the issuing of paper may take a couple weeks, hopefully less. Certainly, if we were looking at another solution of like partnering with another state to use their current solution, that may take a little longer.
Well, is there anything that's been done in order to line up another state so that there's in fact a contingency plan other than a discussion
Yeah,
of the possibility?
No, nothing more than just having conversations with other states, especially during back in the pandemic. I think our focus has really been on shoring up the existing system on the platform that it's on, which is where we were seeing a lot of the failure.
Well, again, given the discussions that we've had over the years about potential disaster scenario, I would think that a contingency plan of some ought to be brought to at least the next level, rather than the assumption that, well, we don't think it's going to happen, given all the things that we know about the existing system, all the things we know about what our capabilities are, all the things we know about the training and so on of the limited number of people that we have, and just the effect of these catastrophic situations that we've had in recent months. I'm really concerned that if we have a 4-year period in which we're relying on this, that I don't have an awful lot of confidence that this isn't going to blow up.
I would just add, for the record, Cameron Wood, and the Policy and Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Labor, and I also serve as the Unemployment Insurance Director. The department does have a continuity of operations plan, and that does include plans in place that have been developed in the past in the event there is some catastrophic failure, primarily around disasters, et cetera, if our building wasn't accessible, et cetera. So, to the commissioner's point, we haven't necessarily deep dove on those over the past year or so in, response to this issue that you're asking about, Senator. But I don't want there to be a perception that we have nothing in place in the event that, we need to exercise what is in our continuity of operations plan. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Our hope is not 4 years. I think based on the schedule that we have, I think we're much more hopeful, closer to a 2-year. The other option, I think, that is available to us in an emergency, if we have a vendor, and I'm going to speak a little bit outside of my lane here, I probably refer to the secretary, but in speaking with the commissioner, we have discussed, in a worst case scenario, can we simply take the system that exists from this vendor and put it in place? One of the things that takes so long in these projects is things like data conversion, things like making sure state-specific requirements are addressed, et cetera. And in a worst-case scenario, can we simply turn the system on and have individuals just come back through. So I think there are things that we've discussed that we could put into place if absolutely necessary. To your point and the concern, I think we recognize that, there's probably more that we should do to make
The
sure.
question is, should you have a contingency plan that has some legs on it?
If you're- To answer the question, I think there's always more that we can do to make sure we're prepared.
And if I'm able to respond as well to that. Given that we have new leadership within the Agency of Digital Services too, to ensure that we have an opportunity to review the current contingency plan and make sure if there's any aspects that are owned by us in keeping that in place and active if we ever need to turn it on, we will do a thorough review.
Well, one thing that I would ask the chair is perhaps for this committee to put on the agenda, kind of a high-level review of the contingency plan at some point in the not too far distant future.
Yeah, along those same lines, are the costs of the contingency plan already built in for staffing and software support? Or are those things that aren't estimated anywhere in anything that we're reviewing so far?
There's no contingency cost built into the project. And so
I mean,
It depends on the
covered by
scope of
budget
the
though, like, is it covered as an unknown cost to us right now?
not within like our base budget.
I guess similar to the senator's request, but different. I mean, I think this committee has the ability to actually reach out to other committees that have jurisdiction over unemployment. And I think it's appropriate. I don't know what the testimony is like in those committees, if you're testifying about this or about contingency plans. But I would suggest maybe if that's not happening, we might write a letter to those committees, and it's the Commerce Committees, right? Indicating we think you should take testimony on contingency plans with the IT system, something along those lines.
Senator, and I want to be cognizant of the time. We've got 13 minutes left.
I noticed that people assigned to this project, have other duties. Is there enough bandwidth for them to do this?
Are you looking on the labor side or on the media side?
I'm looking at.
Both.
So on the folks who are, yeah.
On the EDS side, based on the time requirements, we do have resources available and in place and are confident that we do. And I think having the contracted working with Noah and have managers that we can we're gonna do.
And I guess as a follow on, with this general areas to monitor as well as the additional areas to monitor, do those all fall on the JFO consultants?
That's what my plan is, to look at and monitor those, yes, and I tailor them per project. And related to the conversation that you're just having about, what the contingency plans are, I think almost more important is what's the documentation for the current system on your backup and recovery, how you image the systems, and what's the worst case scenario for data loss. So I can follow up on that particular information too, because to me, it's easier to, some of the older systems are almost easier to back up because they're not like real time. There's like some downtime on them, so you can image them and you can, because they're not, if it's working one day, the image isn't going to break from yesterday. Some things will impact that, like the traffic and whether the system is, can accept the performance that is required of it. But for actual data loss, it seems like if you have a good backup and recovery scenario and you can actually test that, that's going to be a whole lot easier than trying to go to a manual process. So I would be hopeful that based on, there might be some limitations for the system on, you could lose a day's worth of data, perhaps, I don't know, with this situation, but that's what I would explore more. If they're more comfortable.
I have a question. I don't know who this is for, but even just with the outage that was in December, like I had constituents saying they tried calling and weren't able to get through and still haven't been able to get through. And like, I'm just curious what's maybe not built into the contingency plan or budget yet of like that person. I know we have a lot of, states like vacancies. I'm just curious if we're like using AI chatbots or like what goes into place if there really isn't manpower to answer the calls when we have an outage like we did in December.
The stabilization, so from the technology side, the stabilization effort that we're undertaking right now, does speak exactly to what Lisa had said regarding contingency. So all of those standards and documentation are being not only, shored up, I guess is the best way to describe, but also the backup and the backup and we're putting many things in place. Now, as far as what you just described, we are replacing the current system that we use for the call center. And we are putting a modern system in place that does allow for that automation, the chatbot, and that user experience is going to enable the users to be able to self-serve in a way that they can't do today. So that's that.
Just like a black hole.
And I don't want to say we're putting a new system in place, but we're doing things we probably should have done about 10 years ago, but we're doing them now because we need to and we have to for Vermonters, and we don't want it impacting this project negatively. So that's why we're kind of running two consecutive efforts.
It is the biggest challenge I think we have outside of the technology, and it's a universal challenge across all states. Are knowledgeable people who understand unemployment insurance and can administer the program in accordance with the law, and know how to operate the mainframe system to issue, to take claims and issue claims. We ran into this during the pandemic where we didn't have enough bodies to take the calls, and we couldn't find the talent, and then we ended up contracting out that support. We can certainly always go back to that, but that wasn't necessarily a real positive experience for Vermonters either, because they were talking to somebody who was not familiar with Vermont, and they often were getting incorrect information. And so, they kind of just kept circling back around and getting a different answer each time. Using this most recent outage or disruption as an example, we had very deliberate conversations about contracted support, but also knew that it would take weeks to get them back in place as well, to stand up a call center and get staffing for their call center. And we felt like our attention was better served actually resolving the problem, and then being able to deal with the massive number of calls and people not getting through. And I think, we're on the other side of that, where people are now back able to access the claimant portal, and those that can't, we're able to serve through the call center. Doesn't mean there's not long wait times. I mean, traditionally, pre-pandemic, during our high season, people were looking at multiple hour wait times even then. It's just, the pandemic kind of opened a new door in terms of how people come through, using their legislators or others to get in touch with the Department of Labor. And I think some of that just wasn't happening pre-pandemic. Not to say, good, bad, or indifferent. It's just a different path for a lot of people now. And so I think more people are acutely aware of what's going on. So again, I think we'll continue to see our wait times drop from this point forward. But staffing is the number one challenge outside of technology. People, seems like for every person we hire, we lose two more. We run a vacancy rate of about 20%. And it's not easy work, right? Like, these people are working overtime scenarios. They're working on the weekends. The last flood that we had here in December, the state shut down offices and they chose to stay at the Department of Labor and work while the rest of our staff went home. These people are working long hours. So it's also a hard job to recruit for. It's a very stressful environment, and you're literally on the phone from 7:45 or 8:30 in the morning till 6 p.m. at night when the system shuts down.
Rick, and then Rep. Sibylla, have there been any additional outages since the last patches and repairs?
Not outages. I'd let the secretary answer that, but I think what we find is that And we've testified to this in other committees, just a cascading of issues. So one issue gets resolved, but that resolution leads us to find another issue or experience another issue. And some of it dealt with the mainframe, but most of it actually dealt with the information traveling between the claimant portal that collects the information and transfers it over to the mainframe. And then also wanted to look at ways that we shore up and protect our system. And make sure that we've got good validation points through the system in terms of people accessing the system are who they say they are, and we're keeping information safe. And so it's been kind of a perfect storm of multiple storms all coming together. So not an outage where the system is down or offline. But someone, we had an experience where some claimants couldn't file and some could. We had another experience where claimants couldn't access their portal because the PIN number they were using needed to be changed. And so there have been probably 3 or 4 different situations where it has just led to a compounding issue of people experiencing an issue and not being able to get through it.
So I just want to come back to my earlier suggestion. I know previously at Senator Brock about on the commerce committees, is this on your agenda? Is the
Commerce numbers trying today.
it seemed, I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I actually said that would be appropriate for.
I think it would be appropriate to do that. The converse is to provide the alternative that this is something that JCOC could do in terms of following up on the state of contingency planning, because the committees of jurisdiction, I have a real question of whether there's the expertise, but beyond that, whether that there's the time.
And understanding that, Senator, but we also don't have the ability to move language out of here. And so.
That's correct. You're right. You're right. Absolutely. I agree with you there.
Making sure, I mean, maybe a dual track,
Yeah.
letting them know that we are, but, suggesting that this contingency planning is something that we should be testing.
Yeah, and I think it's not just a letter. I think perhaps a conversation between ourselves and the chairs of those committees.
And if it's all right, what I'd like to suggest is, Senator, if you have a chat with your committee, and Rep. Priestley, if you have a chat with yours, and then let us know if that's something that they're amicable to just taking on. If not, then perhaps we can draft a letter in the next before the next meeting, and
Before the system fails.
yeah, send it to the committee for review before signing it, setting it up. Does that work?
Yeah, it does work. Again, I think we just have to anticipate that this is gonna happen again, and not having enough staff is not an option. Like, what's the backup plan? Do we have contract folks that we could, do you have contract folks that you can call on?
We have a contract, but it would take, again, going back to our experience during the pandemic, it took 2 to 4 weeks to stand up a call center. So again, it's, how much money do you want to, we can pay to have a contractor with people sitting in a call center, not taking calls, just ready to go. But that was, at one point we were looking at tens of thousands of dollars a month. To just have them available, right? So again, that's how we can get there. It's just time and money.
Yeah.
Right, and I want to add something to that. I understand the frustration when we say staffing is a challenge, and I understand the point of that's not a sufficient answer. We are actually required by federal law, merit staff, state merit staff are the only individuals that can actually pass on the eligibility of the UI individual. So in some instance, we don't have a choice. And so if there are no Vermonters that are willing to apply to our jobs, and that happens more frequently than you can imagine. We post a position and there are 0 applicants. There is nothing because of those federal requirements.
I mean, I think there's always something that can be done. We were very creative during the pandemic. I mean, certain legislators were creative, you all were creative. I understand that it was expensive, but not providing a service, this service to Vermonters should not be an option. That should not be an option.
Yeah, I would push back and say it's not that we're not providing a service.
In a
It's not in
timely
a manner in which we all would like it to be. But we are providing a service. and individuals are getting paid, there are issues that we are having to work through, and we understand.
Yeah, I mean, I've
Just.
I've purchased groceries for folks that didn't have their checks, so it's consequential.
I appreciate that conversation, and we are
Sorry.
at the top of the hour, or bottom of the hour, whichever it is. And I want to be respectful of everybody being able to get to the committee. I'd like to continue this conversation, perhaps, outside of, the room. I would like to do the vote on the, release. Commissioner, Secretary, is there anything else you wanted to add? I feel like the conversation back and forth, kind of touched on most of the points that we had. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I would just say that we're eager to get started. We have a vendor, ready to go. We have a contract that's, 95% there. So, we just need the okay. And we can move forward.
So I think the process is I would entertain a motion to find this, release of funds favorable. Does that sound like the right wording?
So,
So all in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Perfect. Any last minute, questions, comments, concerns, points of interest before we all run off to our committees again?
Given how we had for the conversation, I'll write an update plan for monitoring, that I'll work on with labor and ADS, and we'll respond to you with that. So you have a chance to chime in on it.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Members, thank you. I'll send out an